didn't realize that this cuts off after recording for 10 minutes. I apologize for that, but what I was saying is that I will get content posted as quickly as I can to make sure that everybody can move at the quick pace that they intend to move for this class. I know that one of the concerns is keeping ahead of the curve on stuff so that when home or work related things come up, you guys can kind of back burner this until you come back. So I will be moving as fast as I can to make this course convenient for you guys. I do want to talk a little bit about the critical approaches now. If you look at that list that I posted up online, we've got 9 available critical approaches. The formalist critical approach is the one that is most directly connected to the content of a specific reading. You only look at the reading itself, and when you create a claim using formalist critical analysis, you are claiming that the author intends to accomplish something and trying to prove that the author does so successfully. So if you're claiming that Vonnegut is anti-fascist in this reading, you have to explain how he succeeds at doing so. The historical critical approach, on the other hand, can look at the time and place and culture in which a piece of literature was created. So if you look at the period when this was written in the 1960s, you've got to consider what was going on. There were moves for equality. Some people consider that the Red Scare had occurred, but that was really more of something that occurred in the 1950s, back when Eugene McCarthy was accusing people of being communists. This is a little bit later in that era when that had calmed down. But the intellectual and cultural influences that occurred at the time something was written are kind of the focuses for criticism in that. The biographical critical approach can focus on the experiences of an author and how those might have influenced his creation of a piece of literature, or you can apply that to a character in the story. So, for example, what about Harrison Bergeron's upbringing might have led him to the megalomania that caused him to declare himself Emperor of the United States, for example. We also have gender criticism, wherein the gender identity of the author and of the audience member, so you, would be taken into consideration when analyzing it. So how do you feel about this story as a male or as a female? And how do you feel that the author's masculinity or femininity, as is appropriate, influenced the way the author wrote that story? So gender-based criticism also focuses on whatever anthropological or cultural influences might have occurred. If, say, George and Hazel might be two gay people in a fake marriage for the purposes of hiding something from their authoritarian government, could the culture at the time in the 60s of not quite accepting openly homosexual individuals have influenced that, if you claim that they're engaged in a fake marriage for their own protection in that society. Psychological critical approach is a little bit more challenging than the other approaches because you have to have a working knowledge of psychology or do some external research to support. So if you argue that Harrison Bergeron engages in his behavior because he has delusions of grandeur, you would have to go get a psychological clinical definition of delusions of grandeur to support that argument. It can be really rewarding if that's something you're interested in, but if you try and apply it arbitrarily, it can be a bit of a challenge because of the nature of supporting your argument. Sociological critical approach looks at the author's relation to the society in which he exists. So was Vonnegut an outsider in his society? Was he widely accepted by his society? Did that lead him to write this story about people being socially ostracized or socially kept down by their government or their society? Or once again, you can apply sociological criticism to characters in the story. How did that society oppressing Harrison Bergeron influence his actions in the story, or George's, or Hazel's, or any other character who you might select? Reader response criticism is a little bit like gender criticism, in which you apply your demography. You know, what social demographic do you belong to? Are you a teenager, a college student, a working class individual? Are you wealthy? Stuff like that. How does your personal history and interpersonal communication affect your interaction with this reading? You will have to identify your demography. You know, if, for example, you immigrated to America from a very oppressive society, does this remind you of your society? Or as somebody who has grown up enjoying the freedom that you enjoy in the United States, do you find this to be sort of a terrifying story? It gives you a lot of different toeholds to work on based on your own personal background. However, reader response is not "I liked it" or "I didn't like it." It really needs to go into why you relate to or do not relate to it because of very specific influences in your cultural experience. Additionally, we have mythological criticism, in which we sort of engage in comparative religion, anthropology, and some other considerations to identify some of the universal archetypes, such as the trickster, the noble hero, and others of that kind. This particular one really lends itself well to analysis of, say, comic books or comic book movies, video games, things like that. Application to this story is perfectly allowable as well. Does, for example, Harrison Bergeron see himself as a messianic figure? Is Kurt Vonnegut trying to develop an entirely new religion based on the accomplishments of human beings or something like that? But you can get a lot out of applying mythological criticism as well. Finally, we run into deconstructivist criticism, which, like it says on the list, is sort of the antithesis of formalist criticism, where formalism is claiming that the author is trying to accomplish something and succeeds at it. A deconstructivist is claiming that the author is trying to accomplish something and fails at it, and then supports that argument. So, where that first critic, CinemaSins, was really being very deconstructivist and explaining how the movie sucks because of all the flaws in it, the second one, from Good Bad Flicks, was being a bit more of a formalist and saying, well, the movie does have its flaws, but despite those flaws, it turns out to be a good movie because of these elements. So those are all of the critical approaches as far as I can remember them. If you see one that's on the list that I didn't cover, please feel free to email me with any questions, but that should give you a good starting point for your papers. If you need additional help, email me on an individual basis. I'm more than happy to assist you in developing further your thesis statement or clarifying those. But otherwise, excuse me, just take a look at the reading, see what kinds of ideas you develop, and go from there. I'm here to help you out with this. I'm not here to throw you in feet first and just let you sink or swim.